There are a lot of truly passionate, intelligent, and interested people who will argue, until breathless and red-faced, that free markets and small governments is the only way to achieve a better world. One of the free market's greatest prophets, Milton Friedman, said, quote, "In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kind of societies that have departed from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by the free enterprise system." Closed quote. This exact sentiment has been the dominant economic and governing philosophy in most of the developed world since the late 1970s. It has become so commonly accepted that even purportedly socialist politicians won't debate it. Capitalism has kept us free and made us rich, while other economic systems have been found fatally flawed. The political equivalent of modern roadkill. If one were to avoid thinking too deeply, it does seem self-evident. I mean, where would you prefer to live? In the former East Germany? Or would you choose West Germany? North or South Korea? How many Americans, Canadians, or Europeans are currently defecting to Cuba? I mean, it's just common sense, right? Right? In this week's edition of Pernicious Chattel, we're going to take a deep dive into laissez-faire economics. But rather than talk about theories, the beliefs, or the mathematics of economics, we're going to inspect the actual participants in the free markets. Do the companies that dominate capitalist marketplaces actually resemble the promised participants that neoliberals describe? Do the largest and most successful companies behave the way neolibs predict? Does the reality of free enterprise in any way match anything that we've been told? Stick around and let's find out. We should start by defining our terms. What do neoliberals mean when they talk about free market? Obviously, they don't mean that we should be given anything for free. According to Investopedia.com, quote, "A free market is one where voluntary exchange and the laws of supply and demand provide the sole basis for the economic system without government intervention. A key feature of free markets is the absence of coerced transactions or conditions on transactions." Close quote. The freedom to which neolibs refer, then, is freedom from rather than freedom to. This is freedom like freedom from seatbelt laws. So you are free to go beltless, and you're also free to fly through the windshield in an accident. To return to Milton Friedman and the vast majority of neolibs who follow him, with all the open-eyed objectivity of medieval monks, the defining feature of market freedom is measured by the lack of government involvement. When compared to other economic theories, this is one of the easiest to understand. Any decision that reduces government involvement is good, and any plan that involves no government is better. This intense passion for free enterprise and completely unrestricted free market capitalism is underwritten by two strenuously proselytized arguments. The first article of faith is that all government intervention is inefficient, and the second unshakable credo is that capitalism promotes human and especially individual freedom. So why do all neoliberals, even the smart ones, believe unquestioningly that all government intervention is inefficient? The key to this particular view is a mythic belief in competition. All individuals, all companies, and all countries compete with one another to sell their goods. Each of these individual sellers will try to convince consumers that their goods are the best. These potential consumers will choose to buy only the best mix of quality, features, and price. This competition is really the ticket to many of the promised benefits of free markets. Because everyone is in competition, then everyone is trying to make themselves more attractive as a seller. They will constantly innovate, offer variety, try to keep prices low, and abracadabra, you get a vast variety of goods for sale and the freedom of choice for the individual. You also get magical efficiency. The seller knows that having a low price is attractive, so if they can find ways to lower cost through cutting waste and bureaucracy, then they will do that. This magic, or as some classical economists prefer, this invisible hand, makes everything better. If you free international trade from regulations, then countries compete and also deliver innovation, better quality, more choice, and all this gets done at a lower cost. Even the fact that some people, some companies, and some countries lose the competition game is a great thing, because then these losers will no longer tie up capital or other resources better directed to more competitive actors. It may be hard on some people some of the time, but as our friend Friedman says, it is the only way, so far discovered, to improve the lot of ordinary people. This quote-unquote reality is what Mark Fisher meant, among other things, when he described capitalist realism. Government, on the other hand, has none of these sensitivities or benefits. They offer what they think people want, or what they think people should want. But government has no need to compete, no need to be efficient, and will be bureaucratic. Therefore, whatever they do will be substandard and or inefficient relative to the free market. Neolibs also have a rational, if dogmatic, reason to believe in the second tenet of free market faith. Capitalism produces freedom. Writing in Forbes magazine, Jeffrey Dorfman says, quote, "Without free markets, you have no free choice. Thus, when we restrict free markets with government regulations, people lose freedom over what work to do, where and when to shop, what to buy. Free markets, in contrast to government-controlled ones, let over 100 million workers choose from thousands of professions and 300 million consumers choose from millions of goods and services for sale every day." Close quote. Milton Friedman, as usual, is even more eloquent. Quote, "Supporting laissez-faire at home as a means of reducing the role of the state in economic affairs and thereby avoiding interfering with the individual, and supporting free trade abroad as a means of linking the nations of the world together peacefully and democratically, in political matters, it means supporting the development of representative government and of parliamentary institutions, reducing in the arbitrary power of the state and protection of civil freedoms of individuals." Close quote. How could anyone fail to find these arguments compelling? After all, it is true we are living through an era of unprecedented wealth, unprecedented improvement in human health and longevity, unprecedented levels of technology and innovation in many areas of life. We've also lived through a period when, for a large chunk of the world's population, civil liberties and protection of rights has expanded. Government's ability to dictate individual behavior has been challenged, circumscribed, and somewhat curtailed. We are, by many measures, freer than our ancestors. Most of these successes emerged at the same time as modern capitalism and freer markets. So these arguments have to be right? Sadly, despite my desire to swallow this dogmatic faith whole and go back to a mindlessly materialistic Christmas season, I'm going to have to object. Even worse, I'm going to have to throw out a wildly overused phrase to explain. Correlation does not equal causation. Yes, we've created economies that are much freer than any economies of the past, and yes, we are richer, healthier, and maybe more free than we've been in the past. But is it an indisputable fact that our current run of global good luck is a result of our economic system? Is an unregulated free market efficient? Is an unregulated free market free from coercion? And is an unregulated free market producing greater freedom? So let's look at the key players in the market. Who are these many, many individuals all competing fairly and without coercion against one another? Almost all measured revenue generated in our free markets are generated by companies. These companies have fairly standard organization structures and can be broken down into three groups. First, the largest grouping, at about 72% of all companies, are sole proprietorships. That is, companies that represent a single owner. The next grouping, at about 10% of total companies, are partnerships, or companies that have a group of owners splitting responsibilities for the company. The last group, representing about 18% of companies, are corporations. Corporations are different in structure than the other two, and the youngest form only coming to prominence in the past 150 years. A corporation is also different because it is owned by shareholders and run by managers. These owners and managers are only partially liable for the actions of the corporation. Shareholders, for instance, can't be held financially responsible for the debts of the corporation beyond the amount of their original investment. The corporation isn't tied to the shareholders. The shareholders are free to transfer their shares of the corporation to others, and the corporation may buy back some shares itself. So while the first two free market businesses are essentially individuals or a small group of individuals, the last company is something different. A corporation is often massive, owned by thousands or even hundreds of thousands of shareholders, but it operates as a single entity and independently on a day-to-day basis from the owners. A corporation is just another free market actor in the eyes of our neoliberal guru, but in reality also something amorphous. The corporation is treated by law as a person, but the day-to-day decision makers are a legion of faceless managers. These managers serve under a set of operating guidelines for the profit of faceless owners. The owners exercise control of the corporation in theory, but they only have influence somewhat at annual meetings, and in reality can only decide to own or not own a piece of the corporation. So we have a free market actor that is and isn't a person, run by a group of persons who aren't independent or liable, for the benefit of another group of persons who aren't in control. Immediately, the theory of free enterprise our neolibs have promised is getting a bit muddy and sus. The messiness in our beautiful neolib dogma isn't some minor distraction either. The modern corporation is the key player in modern capitalist economies. Returning to our breakdown of businesses, while sole proprietorship and partnership represent 82% of all businesses, while corporations account for only 18%, corporations collect 82% of all sales revenue. So if we consider the free market and we follow the money, there is really only one dominant player on the supply side, and that player is the corporation. Our neolib logic then must be free markets are awesome and the only way to a good life, and our modern free markets are dominated by corporations. So corporations must be awesome according to the reasons neoliberals list. They must be efficient, and they must deliver more freedom. I mean, that is where the logic inevitably leads us. What are corporations really? Based on observations from my own 25 years of corporate life, corporations are not primarily producers of goods or services for sale. While they may undertake a plethora of activities on a day-to-day basis, their primary raison d'etre is to maximize the profit reliably generated over their lifespan. This is their self-interest, as economists define it. This profit motive may require them to produce attractive products and services for sale, but that isn't their purpose. Every activity that corporations undertake is simply a means to an end. Generate profit now or in the near future. Unfortunately, much of this self-interest, when scaled up into a large corporate entity, directly undermines the benefits that have been outlined in the neoliberals' faith. Corporations must be, according to neoliberals, efficient. They compete in a free market, therefore, will try to offer what consumers want in selection and at the best possible price. It follows then that they must constantly be trying to increase efficiency to be quicker and cheaper. This isn't at all true. First of all, a corporation doesn't define efficiency the way that a normal human would. A corporation is actually concerned with maximizing the output of their business relative to the input. The output is effectively revenue gained versus cost incurred. This way of defining efficiency is problematic. So for instance, if generating the energy that is needed by a corporation is cheaper by burning coal than by having hydropower, then coal is the most efficient choice. That is, even if coal is inefficient in creating heat, turning that heat into steam, that steam into electricity, if it's cheaper, it is more efficient. If coal is damaging the earth through destroying nature during extraction or damaging the environment through releasing CO2 or other pollutants, it's still cheaper because the corporation doesn't pay these external costs. Similar, having many people making a small poverty wage is just as efficient for the company as fewer people making a higher living wage. As long as it is cheaper to employ many people, many badly educated people for instance, than it is to employ a few well-educated people, but you get the same output, then many cheaper people is better than a few expensive ones. Even if these people are in poverty, sick and suffering, and a burden on their society, corporations don't have to pay social costs. Efficiency isn't a measure of value in any human sense. It is about an arbitrary sum of dollars. So being very wasteful, being very destructive can be efficient, at least according to a corporate or neolib view. The corporation is also highly interested in reliable profitability. This is perfectly understandable from the shareholder's perspective. A shareholder is always going to prioritize an investment that returns 5% with no risk over an investment that returns 5% but with higher risk. This means that shareholders are going to want a guarantee that the corporation is very carefully controlling what they do. The result is having a clear, well-defined hierarchy of control. People near the top, like the CEO, are more answerable to the shareholders and will need to be involved in as much of the decision-making as is feasible. To ensure that this control is in place, there will be the development of a comprehensive and often massive set of policies and procedures that govern employees. There will be a disciplinary system within these policies. There will be an administrative team responsible to track and to manage this policy. When you add up all of these things, you end up with bureaucracy. Neoliberals would like you to believe that big, cumbersome bureaucracies exist only in government. But nothing could be further from the truth. The bigger the corporation, the bigger the bureaucracy. This bureaucracy is by its very nature inefficient. It is a generator of paperwork, of meetings, of alignment sessions, of rule writing, publishing, and communicating. It differs from government bureaucracy only that it is answerable to shareholders rather than society. Neoliberals would have us believe that business is efficient because that is in the business's self-interest, while not in a government's self-interest. But there's a huge problem. The self-interest of shareholders of a corporation and managers of the same corporation are quite different. For instance, the CEO's self-interest is maximizing executive salaries and bonuses, not in corporate profitability. While there is an attempt to link CEO salary and bonuses to profit, this is more often than not done poorly. The list of CEOs whose bonuses are huge while corporate profits decline or share value plummets are very long indeed. More pernicious is the CEO and executive team who understand that maximizing their salaries and bonuses today might be much more beneficial than to deliver a stream of profits to shareholders in the future. After all, whether a corporation is profitable after the CEO retires doesn't do the CEO any good whatsoever. So cutting investments or firing necessary staff to prop up this year's bonuses is sensible even when it threatens future competitiveness of the corporation. Efficiency isn't consistently or even primarily the outcome of corporate managers' actions. When we dive a bit deeper into an organization, the lack of alignment between shareholders and managers becomes even more pronounced. An individual manager benefits from building status by hiring staff and hogging company resources within their department. Or they pad their expenses, or spend all their budgets rather than save. The levels of waste and misuse I've seen in corporate life would make even the most inveterate government bureaucrats swoon. Go to any five-star hotel and you are more likely to find corporate executives and residents than government employees. Neoliberals also love to go on about how private businesses respond to consumer needs facilitated by the market. Therefore, private businesses are more efficient because they're more responsive. Again, with the size and power of modern corporations, this is simply not true. Even if a corporation wants to be responsive, often they cannot. The simple bureaucratic command and control structure stifles their ability to respond. Changes get held up in approval paperwork, in meetings, and in budget allocations. Moreover, because large corporations have bigger influence over the markets they're active in, they can protect themselves from consumer demands and from competitors. As an example, in the tobacco market in the US, there are really only 3 major cigarette manufacturers. These companies simply control almost all the space on the shelves, and any competitor, regardless if their product is cheaper, better, or more innovative, have extreme difficulty accessing those shelves to sell their products. The same is true if we look at the ability to advertise and build awareness of new products. Because corporations own the biggest brands and have the biggest advertising budgets, they have the ability to shout down the competition. Efficiency and responsiveness takes a backseat to influence or, even better, control. These known problems are described in economic theory as oligopoly or monopoly power. They happen frequently, maybe inevitably, as a direct consequence of free market mechanisms. Yet despite them undermining some of the purported benefits of free markets, our favorite neolibs don't respond by calling for government intervention or any meaningful change at all. Are corporations innovative? If we go back to the basic raison d'etre of corporations, we'll find that they have significant disincentives to being innovative. These disincentives take a few forms. Firstly, innovation is always risky. It requires cost, R&D cost, retooling costs, packaging and marketing costs. All of these sunk costs are spent before the innovative product ever reaches market, and may be totally lost if, for whatever reason, the product fails to attract the target consumers. The earlier described corporate bureaucracy also hampers innovation. Bureaucrats tend to be very successful in corporations. They're often intelligent and hardworking, but more than anything, they play it safe to avoid any short-term risks. This gives them significant advantage within a rule-governed and slow-moving organization. Once these bureaucrats inevitably arrive in more senior positions, they will actively resist changing anything. They will put roadblocks in front of the more risk-taking and adventurous employees. They become brilliant at criticizing other people's ideas while avoiding any accountability for generating their own. They understand that security of assets already owned by the corporation takes precedence over some theoretical future success. One way that bureaucrats hamper innovation is through approval processes. Corporations will tend to put in place strict return on investment guidelines for new products or other changes. So, for instance, they will require an average rate of return higher than other investments that a company could make, like keeping money in the bank. This puts potential innovators in a bind. They know that any new innovation is risky, and only a few deliver huge returns. So to recommend a new innovation with a return sufficient to get it approved will also associate the innovator with the promised results. In general, this is a bad bet if you want to succeed in a corporation. And don't forget, the innovator is surrounded by bureaucrats ready to duck and point fingers the second anything goes wrong. There are always a whole gaggle of "I told you so" in every boardroom, dressed in impeccably tailored suits. An innovator may succeed and may secure his or her career, but more likely will fail and will forever be remembered as the idiot who lost a lot of money. The statistical advantage leans heavily bureaucrat. Corporations, then, are completely unlike what neoliberals describe. They're asset managers. The modern corporation owns technologies or brands or access to markets or certain business models or a mix of these. In order to maximize the profit of these assets, a corporation's interest is in protecting the value of these assets. They will invest first in defensive spending long before they invest in growth spending. This tendency absolutely undermines innovation. First of all, strong brands, business models, distribution, etc. are valuable because they protect the corporation from competition. A corporation won't start trying to compete through innovative product offerings or by lowering their prices. They will first try to squeeze competitors out. With their huge resources, they might price very aggressively and squeeze potential innovators that way. Or because they often have expertise in developing and protecting patents, they will disrupt new innovators by launching civil suits. If these strategies don't work, companies use their resources to buy existing patents, not because they have any interest in using the patents for some future product, but because they know that they can make money by protecting the patents and forcing competitors out of markets. Of course, regardless of the quality of their products, if they can tie up consumers and make it difficult for a consumer to make a free choice, they'll do this as well. Think about how hard it is to change a mobile phone service, or cable TV, or bank, etc. If you can't block the competition, at least you can attempt to render your customers powerless. The risk-averse bureaucrats who infect most senior positions at every corporation love these types of strategies, the protection racket, if you will. They understand that consistent profits and low risks come out of effectively managing their existing assets and with much less work involved than creating anything new. These bureaucratic boffins are especially chronic in large corporations' merger and acquisition departments. Let's say a new upstart company pops up and begins to generate success with their innovations. Well then, what do? The answer is quite obvious. Buy the company, acquire its intellectual properties and its patents, and use your corporate muscle to control or bury that technology and strengthen your profits. The objective is never innovation. It is always control and exclusion. Often, the desire to protect current assets will hamper innovations from within the company itself. So, if you work in a large company, you will be familiar with the ridiculous term cannibalization. Cannibalization is when a company launches a new product where the new product attracts customers from the corporation's other products. Success in this case is partially or fully at the expense of existing assets. As corporations become larger, this absolutely happens and often keeps corporations from innovating. I've done some basic searching for quote-unquote corporate innovations to give you some examples of how corporate innovation just isn't innovative. From my old life, I've seen the tobacco giant Philip Morris strategy of creating a smoke-free business. Essentially, there has been massive growth in the cigarette alternatives, vaping, heat-not-burn, and various others. These products have grown because smokers are looking for something that makes them feel good like cigarettes, but which isn't as risky for their health. These products were not developed by PMI. They were not popularized by PMI. So where's the innovation? PMI argues that this is self-disruption because they have committed to converting their whole business to these products by 2030. But to this I say, bullshit. This isn't about self-disruption, but a bid for long-term sustainability and the potential for protecting future revenue and profit growth. The most lucrative markets of traditional smokes are all in decline, and while there's lots of smokers in the less developed parts of the world, these markets are not as profitable. Likewise, it is notable that PMI has created more than 3,400 new patents. As I've said, PMI did not create these ideas, tech, or categories. So what are they patenting? They're trying to figure out and own a configuration of product that is suitable for mass consumption and that is just different enough to be protectable by patent. They're trying to take over a technology they didn't invent and then protect it from competitors. This is the opposite of innovation and the opposite of freer consumer choice. Another example of how large corporations are touted as bastions of innovation, yet completely fail to live up to their reputation, can be found on the website www.visualcapitalist.com and their article Ranked the Most Innovative Companies in 2021. The ranking list is exactly what you'd expect it to be. Number 1 is Apple, number 2 is Alphabet, and so on. No surprises. The lack of surprise is completely not surprising when you look at the ranking methodology that is used on the website. They use 4 variables. First, global mindshare. Secondly, industry peer review. Third, industry disruption. And 4, value creation. In other words, your local favorite massive corporation is bound to win because they are automatically given the benefit of being well-known, mindshare, having a good reputation, peer review, being successful in gaining a big share of revenue, disruption, and having bucket loads of cash, value creation. None of these things have anything to do with innovation. Let's take Apple, for instance. Apple is really successful on the basis of 2 products. First, the iPod, and secondly, the iPhone. So just how innovative are these products? The iPhone is dependent on the mobile phone network, which was invented by Bell Labs, an industrial research center tied up with the US military and various universities. Touchscreen technology has a few inventors, but did not originate out of a corporate office. The first touchscreen was invented by E.A. Johnson at the Royal Radar Establishment in the UK, and Dr. Sam Hurst created the first touch capacitive sensor technology while he was an instructor at the University of Kentucky. So the amazingly innovative Apple Corporation isn't all that innovative. Their innovation was in packaging and marketing of the product, a product largely sourced from non-corporate inventors and funded initially without corporate backing. The iPod was also not a new invention. The MP3 digital audio compression technology came out of Professor Dieter Seitzer at the University of Erlangen in Germany and was turned into the first player by 2 university students, Justin Frankel and Dmitry Boldiev, when they created Winamp in 1998. Again, Apple contributed little innovation aside from some nice design work and competent marketing. For fun, I went through the list of 21 of the most important inventions of the 21st century, published in USA Today, and out of the 21 inventions listed, a total of 3 came out of corporations, with the vast majority of inventions being created by individuals or small, non-commercial laboratories. The argument that somehow human advancement and the benefits of current modernity have anything to do with the free market is plainly a lie. So at this point, I can confidently argue that the modern corporation is the dominant player in our free market economy, and despite what the neolibs may say, does not exemplify the promised free market qualities. They're massively inefficient. In fact, there is reason to believe that they are far more inefficient than governments, with the only difference reduced to the fact that they are not publicly accountable. They waste on a massive scale, but just because few people know about that waste, and even fewer people care, we aren't aware of it. This inefficiency is not offset through the magic of competition either. Competition does not affect the modern corporation consistently enough to force them to do anything that we might consider a benefit. Rather, it creates a tendency to hoard assets, to protect assets from competition, and to make sure that consumers get an offering of illusion of good value and choices rather than anything resembling the glorious horn of plenty that we've been promised. Because they are protected from competition and because their asset preservation role is central, They don't innovate. They have little interest in innovation, and they often spend on trying to stifle or at least control innovation. Rather objectively, we can say that innovation is the fiefdom of the individual inventor, academia, and the nonprofit. Neolibs have a great story, but sadly, their story is a fairy tale. In my next video, I'm going to turn from the efficiency argument for free markets and on to the freedom argument for free markets. It is in this claim where neolibs go from the realm of lying to the realm of complete delusion. I hope that you'll join me then. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see the second part of this hatchet job aimed at corporations, then also please hit subscribe. As always, this is XCG wishing you a speedy trip down that happy road to freedom.